Hey everybody, welcome to another quick save review with me, RC. Today we're going to be playing a bit of The Last Survey on Switch, and this game is pretty unique. It's like a story-driven, like, choose-your-own-adventure style game, where I guess, according to the description, you play a character who's trying to reveal the dark future of our planet. So basically what happens is you play as this character who's entering to talk to some high-up executives about some drilling and stuff that you witnessed, and you know something that they don't. You come back to report what is happening. So this is written out very much like a novel or a novella or whatever, and you basically read everything, put it together, and then the game gives you choices. This is where the choose your own adventure thing comes in, is that you might be talking to characters, like, for example, character might come in and say, like, would you like a coffee or a water, and you pick from there. And depending on what you pick, supposedly this game has a bunch of different endings, so you could play through this 3 different times, and depending on your choices, if you choose completely differently, you could get 3 completely different endings here. So I am maybe just a couple minutes into this, and I figured, you know what, let's jump in where I'm at. You guys will kind of get used to what this is and get an idea what this is. It's not too hard to understand. But basically, we're sitting in the office right now. We're having a coffee, and he is going over basically what he saw and what happened. So basically, he says, I spoke to many drillers and loaders during my trip. Though not necessary for my research, I felt that the technical data was only telling one side of the story. The other half could be told by the men and women who worked the floors up to 60 hours a week. The hazardous work conditions across the company's global operations are well documented, and the scant attention paid to safety has resulted in some very public disasters. Some of my employer's subordinate officers would take personal offense to my assessments, calling my remarks outright insulting. But the real effrontery is bearing witness to the almost absent expectations workers have for their bosses to uphold national safety regulations. Though I don't fault the pit bosses and foremen, I blame the double-breasted, two-faced lobbyists who solicit lenient inspections through bribery and coercion, a practice long maintained by global industrialism. So you can tell that this is handling some pretty deep subjects here, about drilling and mining on the planet and everything like that. Hence why, it says it's covering the dark future of our planet here. So I don't know what this guy is going to reveal in the end, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be good at all. By the way, if this game seems like something you'd be interested in, it just came out today. Normally it's $15, but it's $8.99 for a limited time. So if this looks cool to you and you're looking for something that's a little bit more laid back, more about reading and making small choices, or big choices, depending on what comes up here. Small choices like choosing coffee, big choices like I'm assuming what we're going to be telling our employers here soon, then this might be a game you'll want to check out here. Anybody who's a fan of visual novels too, I feel like you'd be really into this. Still, in all whoever is responsible, the burden is most visibly carried by the miners themselves, slung over shoulders in repurposed burlap sacks, lashed around the waist with burning nylon rope, gripped by blistered hands that will never fully heal. Up here, sitting in this corporate vestibule, amplified the distance between what happens in the ground and what happens behind a desk. The vantage from the 19th floor was cash positive. Liquidity was up, debt down. Shareholders appeased, margins stabilized. So here's our first choice of the video here, but analysts maintain their skepticism. So rightfully so, or which I thought too premature. So I have no idea. I really have no idea. I guess rightfully so. I wasn't the first to conduct surveys, but my employment is unique in that the scope of my findings eclipses any other prospector study. My worry, shared by many of my academic peers, is that my work will not see daylight until it's already too late. I was witnessing a proverbial race to the bottom, into the pit, into the earth, for the very last dollar to the deepest depth. Waiting to be ushered into Senior Ferreira, is it Ferreira? I believe is how you say that? Ferreira's suite. I didn't find much solace in my preparations. At one point, I was comforted by the thought that my research would make a difference, one way or another. Even if I couldn't personally halt operations, I imagined my survey as a hand on the lever, ready to pull once the word came from upstairs. Now sitting upstairs, I can't muster that same confidence. It's not that I don't believe my argument is convincing. The binders resting in my leather satchel clearly outlined a dire situation. My research was unambiguous and forthright. In the final concluding pages of Section 12, ironically, the first pages I expected Sir Ferreira to read, my message is resoundingly clear. You were fucked. Oh my god, the language! So, like I said, deep topics, language, keep these things in mind as you're playing, because, you know, this isn't going to be like your your average visual novel, it seems. The rest of the binder was ostensibly padding to soften the blow, a pillow in front of the pistol. I was trying to savor my complimentary drink. Facile tattoo, ice my nerves. Okay, my twitching knees bellied any sense of composure, even in the ample air-conditioned sweat beaded at my temples. Let's go with that one. Seems like we're going to be delivering some crazy news, so even if it's air-conditioned in there, you'd be like, whew, man, I got to talk about this. Earlier in my career, I used to take beta blockers on a semi-regular basis before teaching lecture hall seminars. The mere thought of hundreds of freshmen staring at me with drowsy, hopeful, and naive eyes can dampen my palms. Time and experience have given way to a generally calmer disposition, and I wouldn't say that I'm a particularly nervous person. But I am a scientist after all. We're not a naturally charismatic bunch. It seemed as though more than enough time had passed for word of my arrival to reach Victor's inner chamber. I should expect the natural delays that plague operations of this magnitude. I've come to expect Victor's attention being pulled in a million directions at once. It comes with the territory of the 19th floor. You can't be up here if you aren't juggling several meetings simultaneously. Writing an email while talking on speakerphone. Reading a report while watching the stock ticker. Signing off on public memos while placating shareholders. All these things. By the way, the other thing I also want to point out too is we're reading a lot here. However, there are a lot of different images in this game. I think that the description page said that there's over 1,500 different images in here, which is crazy. All using this like kind of unique, chalk outline style, which is kind of cool. Victor, like most executives I've met, was a query of cognitive dissonance. You could smell the miasma of doublespeak seeping out of his pores. Like most men in power. Oh man, most men in power. That's not a yawn of the game, by the way. I yawn a lot whenever I read a lot. I don't know why that is. I always tell my wife that. Like, we'll be reading a book together, and I just yawn, like, even during the first page. Like most men in power, he could talk at length without really saying anything, hurling countless syllables and sentences at your general direction without taking a position, one way or another, about any particular topic. The breeze of words that wafted from his mouth could be interpreted as chilly or balmy. It would merely depend on your temperature and temperament. His talk was engineered to be that way, manufactured out of a careful verbal lexicon of convincing neutrality. For Victor, language was a mirror, a shield of glass that could tilt this way and that to represent the best vantage of yourself back to you. But somehow, every time I hear him speak, I find myself forming an opinion. I'd instinctively react, formulating responses and criticisms, assuming I was in the midst of a conversation. It's only much later, only after trying to digest his shards of discourse, that you realize, as I do time and time again, you were mostly talking to yourself. In truth, he was more magician than executive. The door to the waiting room squealed on its hinge. The original assistant who greeted me at the elevator asked me to follow her to Senior Ferreira. That is senior, right? SR? Senor or senior? I have no idea. Ferreira's office. She didn't wait for my confirming reply and started down the hallway before I had fully gathered my binder-filled briefcase. The swish of my linen pants and the clatter of the assistant's heels reverberated in the vacuum of the hallway. I was led to a massive set of double doors, flanked by identical receptionist desks. My guide stood to the side and gestured for me to advance through the midnight-stained teak doors. My hour had come. So do we knock lightly or clear the throat and walk in? If he's expecting us, we just walk in. But I was stymied by a brusque command to halt any further entry. I'm not familiar with that word. I scanned the room in search of the owner of my hostile welcome, but Victor was not to be found. I realized the shout came from behind a cracked door that must have led to an even more private room, the executive bathroom. Ooh. I heard sharp turn of a faucet, handle, and water splash into a hidden basin. Almost immediately, the running water ceased, and Victor's office became a cavern of stillness. He threw open the door with a scowl, and without speaking, gestured for me to take a seat. Attempting to regain some composure, I shuffled into the room and took the most immediate seat I could find. Victor stood. He loomed there like the stratocumulus formations. Clouds, right? Could have said loomed there like cloud formations, but that's fine. I saw in the Malacca Strait a high pillar ready to rain down on me. It's very specific. I feel like there's definitely some sentences in this that are trying to be very, very smart, for sure. His face was the picture of stress, deeply lined with worries, undercolored from poor eating habits, ruddy from overactive socializing. Yet he held himself in a way that was more than mere confidence. His countenance was a challenge, an invitation to best wits, a barrier of power. He was an offspring of Prometheus, a bringer of fire, the trickster/sculptor who forged civilization as an act of defiance. But his physical person belied those projections, for his stature wasn't what you would call imposing. Victor was the model of executive physique, bland. He wasn't tall or short, wide or trim, barrel-chested or sunken. He was a man in between, perhaps at one point more chiseled, but not fully in a state of decline. A passing glance would say that he was handsome, but it was more inoffensive than picturesque. But that was Victor, an anonymous silhouette encased in an unmistakable presence. My bag rested on my lap like a corpse. I folded my hands over the damning contents inside, as if preparing for the final sermon of my research before sending it into the great beyond. This is how I imagine I must have looked, because I took in a deep breath to launch into a speech when Victor interjected. Keep it short. Oh boy, this could be really bad news that we need to keep short, right? I exhaled at the interruption, protruding my mouth in exacerbation. Frowning at the thought of merely following his crude directive, I plucked the binders from my bag and held out one for Victor to examine. He hesitated, but eventually slid across the carpeted floor to meet me where I sat. In one motion, he reached into his jacket to retrieve his reading glasses and started immediately leafing past my introductory statements. He curiously glimpsed past my citations and footnotes, pausing occasionally on graphs with downward trajectories. We didn't speak while he paged through my analysis. Victor became absorbed in the research. With my packet in hand, he stood in order to pace about the room. I couldn't tell if this was good or bad sign. However, I noticed his meanderings weren't as orderly as I had expected. He didn't merely strut back and forth or walk around in a circle. Instead, he zigzagged about his domain, etching secret runes into the imported tapestry that covered most of the floor. Watching him, I realized I hadn't properly acquainted myself with the furnishings of this palatial office. It was impressive, but not outright gaudy. A decorator's touch was noticeable, but not heavy-handed. I could see moments where the CEO had intervened to satisfy his own ego. The typical framed pictures with smiling international dignitaries were discreetly relegated to one cabinet near the entrance, but the cabinet of trophies, awards, and various notable accolades that I would expect to see in an office of this magnitude and prestige was absent. Space that would have been dedicated to such things was instead occupied by pictures of his family and posed photo ops with pit bosses and engineering staff at various facilities, signaling to anyone visiting, "My employees are like my family." I didn't think of Victor as the sentimental type, so I assumed that arrangement of photos must have been a strategic decision. I imagined him during negotiations walking visitors over to this area and telling a very compelling tearjerker in order to sway the attitudes of his adversary. He'd lean in close, almost whispering into the ear of his interlocutor. I don't know that one either. Reciting his story with a tactical tone of empathy and compassion. I feel like a lot of these visual novel type games always make me feel or look stupid whenever I do videos for it, because I'm like, there's always words and I'm like, what is, I don't know that I know that one. His victim would be moved, clearing their throat or adjusting their tie, and would tell Victor they'd reconsider their position or withdraw their complaint, whatever it may be. I wondered if he'd try that maneuver on me. More importantly, I questioned whether I would have the willpower to withstand his maneuver. Well, there you go, guys. I mean, that's a good look at what this game is. Like I said, it is basically a visual novel. You're reading a lot, making decisions. And if this looks like a cool game to you, like I said, it's $8.99 for a limited time right now. So definitely look into it if if you're interested here. Out today on Switch. But guys, thank you for watching, and of course, I'll see you all next time.